Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tiffany and I'm the owner of Tiffany Migurdia Cosplay, LLC, which is a company that focuses on costume and prop fabrication as well as education. And I'm excited to bring you another sewing tutorial. This one is specifically going to be for Roxy from the anime Mushoku Tensei. Yee! And I'm excited because this was a really fun build and it didn't take me too long at all. And for those that are new here, I'd really love to have you as part of our costume building community. So subscribe to the channel as well as don't forget to like the video. It really helps. This video is specifically for all of this. So Roxy's jacket thing, the sailor collar, as well as the beautiful waist piece. And I'm gonna break this up into different segments for this tutorial, so you can check in the description for all of the chapters if you are making a specific part of this and you just want to skip to that. So yeah, let's begin. And let's start off with the jacket. And here is everything that I used specifically for making this jacket. And I'll have links to everything in the description, as well as don't forget to grab my pattern for the jacket. I'll have a link there as well. That's available on my website. So let's begin. And the first step is we're going to be grabbing our tan color fabric, and I specifically used brushed polyester wool, and I got this when Joann's was still around, so we know how that went. But I'll try to find a link to another fabric place if you want this specific fabric that I used. If not, you can use another type of brown fabric. It should work just fine. And you're going to want to put your pieces onto the fabric and cut them out using scissors. Then put that temporarily to the side, and we're gonna grab all of our white pieces for the collar section of this jacket, and we're going to place them onto basic white cotton is fine, or Kona fabric. I love that, that's my favorite. And you're gonna again cut them out. And then with the guidance of my pattern, it should indicate which pieces go to what. So we're gonna start by pinning all of these white collar pieces to the tan fabric. There should be 3 in total right now. And then we will take it to our sewing machine. And pretty much throughout this entire project, we're going to be using 4 basic types of stitching. The first one is going to be our straight stitch. The needle is going to be on the left for this one, and we're just going to sew all of these pieces together. Afterwards, I like to go back with an overcasting stitch, and this is going to make it so your pieces will not fray anymore. And the next step is optional, but I really find that doing this will help improve the quality and the look of your overall costumes and builds. And I like to go and iron it where the sewn edge is now going to lay flat on the inside, and I'll go back with my sewing machine and a straight stitch with this time the needle on the right, and I will sew that flat. And this will make it so it's nice and pressed and you won't have an itchy seam rubbing against your skin later. Then we're going to grab those 3 now sewn pieces, and we're going to pin those front 2 parts to the back, connecting at your shoulder pieces as well as along the sides. Then back to the sewing machine, and you guessed it, starting off with our straight stitch, needle on the left, and then finishing up with an overcasting stitch to lock it all tight. And this is kind of how it should look so far. And then next, I'm going to grab my last type of fabric, which is Kona black, and I'm going to put it onto my fabric and cut it out with some scissors. Side note, you can also, instead of using this black fabric, you can use a black single fold bias tape for this part. This is going to be the part that we're going to pin to the connecting part of the white and brown and basically hide that seam. But if you don't want to buy extra material and you want to use the same black for this project, I just made it myself, and that's where you just cut out this piece of fabric from my pattern, and then you'll just want to iron the edges over towards the back, and that will basically create your single fold bias tape. And then we're going to go to our sewing machine, and we're going to sew this in one direction on one edge first, and this is going to be a straight stitch with our needle on the right. Then once that is done with that first pass, we're going to go back with a second pass on the opposite side, going in the same direction, this time needle on the left. And this will make it so that way your fabric does not push and pull in opposite directions and should lay perfectly flat. And let's not forget about the judgmental kitties that'll be throughout this video, Yuki and Nami. And And for me, I like dramatic costumes. So for capes and for long jackets, I found that by adding horsehair to the bottom, it's going to help make the fabric naturally fly out when you don't have wind and you're just walking around, rather than the fabric just kind of hugging around you. And for this, I'm going to be using 2-inch horsehair braid, and I'm going to pin it to the bottom part of this sewn jacket. And then we're going to go to our sewing machine, and we're going to be using the last type of stitch that I'll be using throughout this video, and it is called a stretch stitch, or your lightning bolt stitch. And we're going to sew this on the bottom in one direction first, and then in that same direction, we're going to sew the top part going down as well. And then don't forget to do your edges as well, and you can trim off any extra horsehair that goes past your fabric edge. And now to make all of our black fabric hairy with Nami this time. We're going to be cutting out all of the black trim again with our Kona Black. Doing this twice, and I will note that I only cut the middle triangles out on one of them, and this part was going to be for the outside, and for the inside I did not use those, but if you want to, you can. And then we're going to grab our iron, and you're going to want to fold the small edge over on the inside only of these pieces. And I found this to be a lot easier of a process, because then next we can go and sew this part flat, and you don't have to worry about it moving on you later. And I did this with a straight stitch and needle on the right. And I did this for both of the black trim parts, and once they were sewn, I then could pin them together. So you want to make sure that the part that we just sewn, the seam is facing outwards, and we're gonna sew with a straight stitch and our needle on the left, sewing the outer part of this trim together. Then we're gonna flip it inside out and go back over with an iron to lay it all flat. Then you should be able to sandwich our tan fabric in between the two black parts and pin it in place, and it should cover all of our horsehair and hide it. Then for sewing, and for this we're going to be using a straight stitch, needle on the left, and sew around all of the parts. And here's what it looks like so far. Then onto the collar, and we're going to be using the black Kona fabric, cutting this part out twice, then pinning together, and we're going to sew the outer edge together with a straight stitch, needle on the left. Then you're going to want to iron the bottom part, the part that goes inward towards itself, and we're going to pin those two pieces together, and we're going to sew the outer part now and flip it inside out, and that should give us our double fold bias tape for this part. And then we're going to pin it to our white collar piece and do a final stitch on that, this time a straight stitch with our needle on the left. Now to attach the collar to the jacket, and I highly recommend folding each of the jacket and the collar in half and adding a little sewing pin. That way you know where the middle is, and connecting those two pieces in the center and working your way outwards with pinning. This will ensure that they align correctly. Then sew it once again with our straight stitch, needle on the left, and then we're going to be using our overcasting stitch to lock the fabric together. And for me, I ended up going with a black separating zipper, so that way I could get in and out of this jacket, but you could always end up hooking eyes, you could do snaps, and whatever you feel the best. I just found it easiest for the zipper, so I pinned this to one side of the jacket and then to the other, and I sewed it with my zipper foot and my sewing machine. And if you're still here, thank you very much, because we're going on to our last steps for this jacket, and it is going to be the sleeves. And I start off by cutting black rectangles out of our Kona fabric. You're gonna want to do this twice, as well as cutting the main sleeve part out of our tan fabric. Again, do this twice. And with this tan fabric, you can fold the cutout parts in half, hot dog style, and pin them along that line, as well as repeating this for our black part. You're gonna fold that rectangle in half, hot dog style, and pin. Starting by sewing the black part, we're gonna do it along the longest edge with a straight stitch first, needle on the left. Then we're going to fold it again in half, this time hamburger style, and we're going to sew the small edge together with a straight stitch, needle on the left, and then we're going to finish that off with our overcast stitch. Then put that to the side, and we're going to grab that tan fabric, and we're going to start with our straight stitch, needle on the left, going down that piece, and once again we're going to lock it in place with that overcast stitch. And while that tan fabric is still inside out, we're going to slide that black fabric right on top to the bottom, and we're going to pin that seam to the bottom part of the tan fabric and take it to our sewing machine, starting off with a straight stitch, needle on the left, and our overcasting stitch to finish it. Then flip the tan fabric inside out, and we're going to also flip that black fabric inside out, and it should lay on the outside without showing that seam. All that's left is to pin those sleeves to the jacket part and sew them together. First with a straight stitch, needle on the left, and finishing out this jacket with our overcasting stitch to complete the jacket. And congratulations! I'm regretting making this whole video with other sections. I should have just made this into one, but anyway, there you go. Thank you for watching, and we're gonna go on to the next piece now. Yay! And the next part is going to be the waist wrap. And if you skipped the jacket part, welcome! Hi! We're doing the next part. If you didn't, I'm glad you're still here. Thank you for watching. And these are the specific tools and materials that I used for making the waist piece. And again, I'll have links to all of this in the description, as well as you can find my pattern for this on my website, link in the description, or go to tiffanyGordonCosplay.com. And the main type of fabric that we're going to be using for this one is a brown all-purpose potting soil linen. And you're going to want to put your pattern onto this fabric and cut each part out twice. Then we're going to pin the parts together, starting with the top rectangle piece. You're going to pin the top and the sides of that. And for the bottom weird half flying saucer thingy, you're going to pin all of the edges except for the top part, which should be the longest part. Then to our sewing machine, and we're going to sew all of these with a straight stitch and our needle on the left. Then flip them inside out, and I highly recommend ironing your edges once this is done so it lays as flat as possible. And you're going to sew that edge closed, as well as we're going to go along all of our edges that we just ironed, and we're going to sew that so it lays flat. And this time I did a straight stitch, but the needle is going to be on the right side this time. Then starting in the center, you're going to pin your two sewn pieces together and work your way toward the outer parts, and then we're going to sew those two parts together to create one, starting with our straight stitch, needle on the left, and finishing off with our overcast stitch, so that way all of our fabric will not fray. Then grab that brown fabric again, and we're gonna grab the belt loop part, and this one you're going to want to cut out 5 times. And for making these, you're going to want to fold the edges over on the long side, and we're going to sew down it, this time with a stretch stitch or lightning bolt stitch. And you'll do this for both of the sides. Then I kind of indicated with my sewing pins where they were going to be placed onto the fabric, and with a ruler kind of measured out the distance of where I wanted it to start. You're going to pin it so that way the edge is going to be facing upwards, and you'll pin it so it goes long way facing out. Then you're going to do a small little stitch over each of these parts using, again, our stretch stitch. And once that's sewn, you're then going to fold it down and make sure the very bottom part gets tucked underneath it and pin it in place. And then one more time back to the sewing machine, and we're going to again use our stretch stitch and sew that bottom part down. And this should make it so just the top and the bottom are sewn, and you should be able to put a belt through it. Now for some little detail button parts, and you can do this a bunch of different ways, but this is what I did, and I found these little crafting wooden circles, and they were a variety of sizes, and you can get them at any hobby store, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, a craft store of some sort, or if you want, you can use 2mm EVA foam. Whatever works best. But you're gonna get that and grab some glue. I specifically used leather weld glue. You can also use a fabric glue, and you're going to attach each of these circles onto the fabric. You will want to have extra fabric because we're going to fold it around it afterwards. Then put those completed pieces to the side, and we're gonna cut out the parts for the belt, the tan fabric. And for this, I used the brushed polyester wool, the same that we used for the jacket, and you wanna cut this part out twice. Then with the help of the pattern and cutting out where those circles were, I attached each of our fabric covered wooden circles on top of one of those tan pieces. Now, depending on the type of glue, you will want to make sure that it is fully dry and attached before continuing to work. But once it's done, we can start attaching some Velcro. And for me, I did it onto the back side of our non-button piece, where the triangle part is, and then onto the part that our buttons are attached to, I did it on the opposite side on the end tail part. And you want that Velcro to be on the same side that the buttons are. And then we're going to sew it together. And also recommend using non-adhesive Velcro, it's just gonna work a lot better, but sew it with a straight stitch. Then once that's sewn, you can pin the two pieces together, and you want to pin it so all of the stuff is facing inside. So you shouldn't see any of the Velcro at this point, just the cat. Then sew, and we're gonna sew all of the edges except for the very end, the small edge. And you're gonna do this with a straight stitch needle on the left. And we left that open because this is how we are going to flip all of our fabric inside out. And it may take a little bit, just be patient. And I think it looks a lot cleaner when you go back afterwards with a straight stitch. And for this, I went around all the edges with a straight stitch and the needle on the right. As well as don't forget to close the very end where we had open before. And the very last step is just to pull that belt through all of the belt loops. And congratulations, you finished the waist part of this cosplay. And on to the last part of this Roxy tutorial, and this is going to be for her sailor collar. And just like the other ones, here is the list of all of the tools and materials that I used specifically for the sailor collar. Again, links in the description, as well as the pattern is on my website, link in the description. And for this, you're going to want to put your pattern on top of a white fabric. I just used a generic white cotton and cut it out with some scissors. As well as you can either buy single fold and double folded bias tape. You'll want a 1/2 inch size, or you can make it yourself. And I ended up using my black Kona fabric and making all of my strips myself. And for this, basically, you're just going to get your fabric, and if you want your piece in the end to be a 1/4 inch, you're going to add a 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side of the fabric. Once you iron the edges over a single fold bias tape. If you're going to be doing a double fold bias tape, you will want to time this by 2. So that way you have it and can fold it again. And I started out with the single fold, working on the middle black strip of this collar. And basically I just got my piece and I laid it on top of the pattern, and I added an extra 1/4 inch to either side, then pinned them together and sewed it at a 45 so it would make a nice triangle. I have a better video of this later on, so if you're confused, just fast forward a little or wait. And once that strip was made to the lengths I wanted, I then figured out where it was going to lay on the fabric, pinned it in place, and then went to my sewing machine to start sewing it. Starting on one edge, and we're going to sew it together with a straight stitch and our needle on the right. And then once we go all the way around, we're going to again start on that same side that we started on and sewing in the same direction. We're going to do it again, but this time our needle is going to be on the left. And this will make it so our fabric does not pull back and forth if we were to go the opposite direction. Then to figure out our edge part, and for this one is what we're either going to make or buy our double fold bias tape. And this, we're gonna go and cut each of our pieces of our bias tape to the length that we want. Make sure to add that extra 1/4 inch or more on each of the edges. And where the two parts are going to align at a corner, you want to cut them at the same angle. So for this part, we're going to cut at a 45, and these both should end up being the same angle when we flip it inside out and then pin it. So now it should be a triangle-like shape, and we're going to sew along that edge with a straight stitch. And then trim any extra, and you will fold it back inside out. That way the correct edge is facing outward, and it should lay perfectly in that 90-degree angle for you. Then always go back and check your pattern and make sure all of the length is correct. This does take a little bit of time and patience, but once you get a hang of it, it's a really handy method of doing all of your future cosplays. Repeat this whole process for the entire edge of this collar, and once that's done, you can pin it onto your white fabric with the white fabric sandwiched in between your black bias fold. And then back to the sewing machine, where we're going to sew it with a straight stitch and our needle on the left. Now this part is not indicated in the pattern, but you will see in all of the reference images of Season 2 Roxy, which is specifically this costume that we're doing, and where all of the circles are indicated on the pattern, there actually is going to be an X-like ribbon that cuts across. And so I ended up getting just basic black ribbon, cutting it in long strips, and we're going to pin it on top of our fabric on either side of where basically our circle is going to lay. Make sure you're not going too far because you want the circles later on to hide it. And then we're going to sew it. And for sewing it, I used a stretch stitch just up and down to hold it in place. And then repeat this for the opposite side, making sure your pieces make an X over it. And then just like for the waist piece, I'm using these wooden circles that I found at a craft store, and I covered them in our black fabric using some fabric glue. And for attaching them, I ended up using contact cement glue. This is where you apply the contact cement glue to both the fabric and to the backside of what you want to attach. Wait for the glue to dry and then attach them together. You can also do this with fabric glue, and then you don't have to wear a respirator, but this was just the method I used. And that completed our sailor collar. But I will note that I did do some stuff that I did not film, and that includes adding snaps to the back of the sailor collar underneath the bottom black circle, and I did these snaps where they would attach to the tan jacket. Just made it so it didn't move on me. As well as for the sailor collar, there's actually a brown strap that goes around, and I ended up using the same brown fabric that we used for the waist piece, and I made this strip and sewed snaps to the ends of each of them, as well as to the bottom of the sailor collar, and this is kind of how I did that piece. And that, guys, is how I made all of Roxy's outfit, jacket, sailor collar, and waist piece. Yeah! I really hope that this helped you for making your own version. And if so, let me know in the comments, as well as what other characters should I bring to life next. Let me know in the comments. I'm always looking for new cosplay ideas. As well as don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, as I'd love to have you as part of our cosplay building community. A big thank you to all of my company sponsors here on YouTube, as well as all of my members, specifically those legendary members who financially help to support me so I can continue doing this as my full-time job and my main source of income. And I'll see you for our next tutorial. Much love, guys.